Previously on Traverse the Thames. After a tough beginning in the headwaters knocked 2 of the 4 paddlers out of the journey, things turned around in London for Mark and Hayden, and they managed to get floating and paddling again. Now on day 4, they face their biggest challenge yet, a 55-kilometer day through the heart of First Nations territories and the most remote sections of the river. This is Traverse the Thames. After a peaceful night camping beside the river, the 2 adventurers awoke the following morning and began prepping for a long day on the water.
I think today should be the first day where I really feel like the struggle with the arms, because we're gotta travel over twice the distance basically we've traveled any other day previously.
Their day would start near Komoka Provincial Park.
Komoka, Kilworth into Delaware there's tremendous fall in the river. It's got gravel bottoms.
I think the river is in transition. We're just coming off that steepness of the river, the upper Thames River area, the watershed, and then grading into the lower Thames where Delaware starts.
Early paddling proved to be easy, and the water deep enough to stay in the boat. A stark contrast to every other day they'd experienced so far.
All of the enjoyment I thought I'd be having the whole time started to happen, so it was really a lot of fun in that section. I felt like, yeah, this is doable. We had everything, we had a lot of food, we had all of the supplies we needed. It was just the 2 of us. You know, there was really a good sense of optimism that this was finally starting to turn around and be a good experience.
We also hit some rapids that were kind of fun, to be honest. So finally rapids that weren't just rocks that we were stuck on, rapids where we could actually make it over them and kind of hit them with some speed and try to find paths. And sometimes I'd like bounce off a rock and Mark would blow past me, and other times, you know, he would hit off a rock or get stuck a little bit and then I would go past him. And us trying to figure out how to read the rapids, trying to aim for the white spots and trying to find the fast water. And I felt like I gained a lot of experience during that section about how to manage that. I think we paddled hard through there, and it gave us a lot of confidence that we had gotten through the toughest part of the trip, and that it was not necessarily smooth sailing the rest of the way, but we were prepared and ready for the rest of the journey.
As they made their way down the river, they noticed a changing landscape and unique sights that couldn't be seen anywhere else but from the water.
That section is really not accessible on foot. You have to be on the water to get to it. So it was like you were seeing something you'd never seen before.
We have not seen this yet, but it's just empty, just piles of empty clamshells.
They paddled around a few bends and passed by the small town of Delaware, which had some of the last buildings they'd be able to see from river level for almost 100 kilometers.
There was a lot of islands around that section, which I thought was really cool to see. You could scoot one side, or in some cases Hayden and I would split around an island and come back together. So it was kind of cool in that sense, and you'd experience different things like going down through a rapid section and around an island and through some sort of canyony areas, and it was a different way of looking at it. There was obviously more islands exposed because of the water levels.
As they paddled under that bridge, they also left the upper Thames watershed, now officially entering into the lower Thames Valley watershed.
On the Thames River, there are two watershed-based agencies, the Upper Thames River and the Lower Thames Valley. And the Upper Thames watershed, or the upper part of the Thames watershed, is really a classical trellis-shaped watershed. And the tributaries and the main rivers really resemble almost the veins in a leaf or the branches on a tree. On the main branches, there's a fall of about 11 feet per mile. The watershed reflects those characteristics when the runoff occurs. As we move into the lower Thames, the Thames comes through a glacial spillway, really, that was left over from the last ice age. And then as it moves on downstream, it really flattens out. As the ice sheet receded, the lower part of the Thames actually occupied a lake bed. And as the waters receded, the river was left to really carve its own channel.
They carved their way down the river, getting ever closer to the First Nations communities, but not before they saw some interesting sights.
We passed under the Highway 402 bridge. We saw one person, and that was one of only 3 people we saw that day.
And some ominous signage.
Caution. Caution, gun range, stay out! Oh, hell no! But I was amazed at how far we were able to get through. We actually got ahead of schedule, I feel like, by that point.
We're doing way better than we thought we were, that's for sure. We've been paddling at about 8 kilometers an hour. Very impressive stuff for us.
You notice the river starting to change. It was starting to flatten out. The tons of rocks that you'd see on the shore and in the water was starting to become sand and clay.
Then we got to the reserve, and it was flat. So we lost the rapids, and we just kind of were in cruise mode then. Well, we're kayaking.
Hayden and Mark stopped on the shore for a break. It was there they saw the signs of more extreme wildlife. However, when they checked the map for their location, they realized they weren't as far ahead as they thought.
We saw a bridge which I incorrectly thought was the Munsey Road Bridge. It was the Westminster Drive Bridge, which I didn't know existed. So we thought we were halfway. Turns out we're only about a third, which, you know, we went from a nice little high. Now we're kind of like, oh, crap.
I still feel okay shoulders-wise and stuff, strength-wise, but I'm worried that it's going to get tough now.
My wrist is starting to really bark every time we stop. When I'm moving, it's okay, as long as I don't really kill it.
If the rain's coming down now too, that's a bit of a concern, so I think we just got to kind of get back on there as soon as we can, just start rolling.
I'll just have to tough it out, I guess. I mean, one way or the other, got to keep going.
The rain tapered off, and Hayden and Mark hit the water again.
Still kayaking.
As they paddled into First Nations territory, they were treated to a spectacular display of nature.
Started seeing things, more extreme wildlife, things that were kind of made me feel more of the nature experience, which I was really looking forward to, like getting in touch with the nature again and kind of getting out there in the land, seeing what is hidden, some of the hidden gems, I guess, in southwestern Ontario.
They reached the Munsey Road Bridge and began the longest stretch between bridges on the river.
Some of the things that I remember on the pro side were just some of the awesome wildlife, how well I feel like their community is connected with the river a lot more than London is. The river seems just to pass through London as like a city where there's a river that goes through it. On the reserve, you can see there's things like there's teepees near the water and there's fish traps near the water, so there's clearly they live with the river a lot more and interact with it a lot more than people in London do. I feel like people in London just look and go, oh, there's a river, and don't really think much of it. Whereas more in the reserve, they live with the river a lot more and interact with it a lot more and are probably a lot more in touch with it.
This community used the river as like a source of its livelihood, and it was really connected with the river in a way that the other areas we'd been through hadn't been in that sense.
As beautiful as the scenery was around them, fatigue began to set in,
Still kayaking.
which led to mistakes. Then the rain returned, this time much heavier. And as they pulled over to poncho up and contact their support crew, they discovered another unfortunate consequence of the downpour.
When it started to rain, you couldn't really send messages on the phone because the water would mess up the way the phone worked.
This is not fun. Plus, I keep getting turned around. And it's raining harder. And the phone's messing up because water got in it. So it's really nice to see everything kind of falling apart right now.
And it was very frustrating because couldn't communicate with the people we were trying to get to help us.
But after a miserable hour, the rain abated and they saw a bridge, the Melbourne Road Bridge they had targeted at the start of the day. Hayden couldn't help but get a little emotional upon their arrival.
Oh, thank you, Bridge. Thank you for being here. Oh, so beautiful.
After meeting and giving their shore crew their now dead communication devices, they would make a critical error, one that would ultimately define their journey.
After the Melbourne Road Bridge, I made a mistake.
For me, I made the worst decision of the trip.
I said, 7 o'clock, got our last supply drop, and we're looking for camp from there, and we're getting camp by 8 o'clock.
It really falls on my shoulders what happened.
We got back on the water, and we realized that it was already after 8 o'clock.
I made the decision, kind of looking at a map, to say, okay, we're going to meet our shore crew here. We're going to try and get further down the river, and we'll meet you here. There's a road that's close by. Technically, I thought you should be able to access the river, but even though on the map it looked like it was right up against the river, the reality was that there was actually a farmer's field in between the road and the river, and there was huge 30, 40, 50-foot ravines that were very steep, and you couldn't get a boat up it. Forget about getting someone down it. You just couldn't stop there.
We were screwed.
The sun dipped below the horizon and blanketed the area in darkness, cutting their shore crew's chances to find them to zero. Hayden and Mark were alone on the river with no communication devices and with nobody sure where they were.
It was a panic because at any point in time we could hit a low spot, I could get grounded.
I wasn't so much worried about paddling through the middle of the night. Hayden was really concerned about his safety and our safety.
I was very frustrated because we were in a situation where I felt like my life was put at risk.
I was really more concerned with the fact that our shore crew guy was wandering around this area he didn't know in the dark and could potentially fall and hurt himself or something like that.
When it became clear they weren't going to meet their shore crew, they began to look for a spot to camp for the night.
We were trying to get to the next bridge, but it was about a 3-hour paddle. We ended up paddling till about 10:30 at night.
It was honestly one of the most surreal moments in my life as well, because going along the river, pitch black water in front of you, there's a moon out there and it's clear skies, so the moon's reflecting off the water in front of you. And what was amazing is I always knew where the banks of the river were because there were fireflies all along the trees on the banks of the river.
After finding a flat, secure location to pull off the water, they started a fire and ate their only food they had. Then, after setting up their tents by firelight, they got some rest and hoped for a better day tomorrow.
We got up pretty much when the sun got up. We were up around 6:30 in the morning. We'd only slept about 5-6 hours, which kind of was par for the course at this point in the trip. We disassembled our tents and got back in the boats. We decided we were going to go to the next bridge and see if we could maybe go to a house and find a way to communicate again with our shore crew.
We are still alive though, so if we're counting the positives, there's that. Counting the negatives, it looks like it's about to be a thunderstorm, so we're going to get out on the river.
It was only a few minutes before they reached the next bridge, where they would again get help from the locals to reconnect with their shore crew.
We got to the bridge, we climbed up and knocked on the very first door right by the bridge. At 7 in the morning, this bearded man opened the door and let us in his house. It was another example of just a stranger's kindness.
It was really by his good graces that we managed to get on track and everything, and now we're just about ready to get back in the river and carry on to Big Bend Conservation Area. But I have to say we were more lucky than planned at this point.
Now reconnected, they got back on the water and started paddling again, with some ominous clouds lurking overhead.
Getting back on the water and planning our next destination, knowing that we weren't going to have to trek very far.
It should be a very short little paddle.
But then the rain came. Although the rain wasn't honestly that bad, it sucked, but once you get wet, you're wet, and you're not going to get more wet.
Hayden seemed to deal with the rain better than Mark.
Up until that point, it really felt like nature was doing everything it could to try and sabotage the trip.
We get a storm and very quickly the water rushes to the river. We don't have wetlands, we don't have forested areas like we did back in the pre-European days. So for that reason, the river has become much more flashy and it responds very quickly.
Hammered down, making for a miserable paddle.
It was raining pretty hard though for a while, and we did see some lightning and hear some thunder coming through as well, so we were a little concerned about that weather-wise. But I think overall we were pretty prepared for the rain.
The month of April was a little bit cooler than normal. We had lots of precipitation, and then shortly after the 1st of May, it just stopped raining.
And while the plants absorbed the badly needed precipitation, the soaking of Mark and Hayden, as well as the waiting shore crew at the following bridge, had everyone fed up and ready to go home.
That day was just a lot of rain, kind of a lot of misery, and you're just like, well, is this ever going to become good? Is this ever going to be a happy, fun experience? I really didn't know at that point.
This rain sucks.
Compounding matters, Mark's wrist had worsened, causing constant pain as he paddled.
This journey seems to be stacked up against Mark, to be honest. But he's still stubbornly pushing through. I can't let him do it by himself because he might die, especially last night I realized that. So here I am.
Mercifully, after 6 hours of paddling through downpour, they approached their target, Big Bend Conservation Area. Hayden and Mark had reached their target hours ahead of schedule, but they were about to receive some more bad news.
We had 2 shore crew members there who basically said they were done. They didn't want to come out and sit in the rain and wait for hours for us. They had signed up because they thought they'd be able to do, the resupplying, but also kind of live vicariously through our experience with them. And what they really experienced was they'd taken a day off work to stand on a bridge or walk down these huge steep ravines where there's no real access to the river and deal with poisonous plants and get poured on in rain just like we were. They were just watching this disaster unfold, and they didn't know why they were choosing to be a part of it anymore. So they basically said at that point that they didn't want any more part of this, and they were out.
For the 4th time in 5 days on the water, the awareness campaign was in serious jeopardy. And with a planned 3 more days on the water, there was no way they could complete it without another supply drop. With only about 100 kilometers left to paddle, they were determined to finish, but they needed a plan. So, for the first time on the trip, they discussed things together and made a group decision.
I felt like that was a big moment. I felt like that was a moment actually where I was able to demonstrate some of the leader skills that I wanted from the night before.
If we're going to do this, if we're going to finish this, should we just go for it? Should we just get in the boats and paddle as far as we can go?
So I took on some more responsibility in the aspect of making sure I controlled time. I made decisions about how often we were going to stop and things of that sort. And we would discuss as a group where we were going to plan to get to and what we were going to do on our way. So I felt like I was able to kind of emerge as a leader in that moment and that day.
We had convinced the shore guy to do 1 more drop at Thamesville Bridge, which he kind of begrudgingly agreed to, but I think he wanted to see us succeed too when we said we were going to do it. And he said, if there's nobody else to do this, I will do it. And I have a lot of respect for him for still helping us, even though he had so many reasons not to.
With the last supply drop agreed upon, they hit the water once again and got moving.
We started paddling forward. We got about an hour and a half further down the river. The rain finally stopped. It was like nature finally said, oh, now you have that plan in place. Now you have the goal in mind. I'm going to stop pouring on you all the time. I'm going to stop making this so difficult. And it just became Hayden and I and the river.
After paddling for an extra 90 minutes, they found a narrow spot on the side of the river ravine to camp. There, Mark impressed by starting a fire using only wet sticks before they went to their tents for some badly needed sleep.
I'm going to try to get some sleep. At least 15 extra kilometers probably to do tomorrow. So, gotta try to get some rest on an angle as I fall towards a river. Anyway, night all.
On the next episode of Traverse the Thames, Hayden and Mark face a daunting task of trying to eliminate a day off their trip while paddling through the most historically significant sections of the river. But with Mark's wrist fading hard and big distances still to cover, it becomes increasingly difficult to keep paddling.